The ideal to do an adventurer's journal is something that's been with me probably since the inception of Journey to the Overland. In fact, in a lot of my own games, when I play Journey to the Overland, I will tend to use a notebook or some type of journal myself. I've always thought that journaling in a solo role playing game is probably the most indispensable part of the game. You can play any kind of game and roll dice. You can play any kind of game and move figures on a map. You can play any kind of game and reference a book. But when it comes to taking part in a role playing adventure, especially one that's going to occur mostly in your mind and your imagination, uh, being able to create a journal is what brings it to life. I remember with uh, Tolkien and The Hobbit, the thing that really impressed me the most about The Hobbit, if you really follow the story, is he's reading from his journal. He's writing the journal you see at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings. And even The Hobbit itself is actually a story that is brought to life from his journal of his travels with Gandalf and the dwarves. So, in Journey to the Overland, it's always been a very important part of the game to keep and write your journal. And I think anybody that doesn't do the journal is never going to really appreciate the game for what it is. So, the ideal to do a overland journal, as I like to call this, or the adventurer's journal, which is kind of just a title, as in what it would be to you. It would be your adventurer's journal. Was kind of always there in the ideal of the character sheet. I'm on probably two different iterations of the character sheet at the moment for Journey to the Overland. But really, the first original character sheet is the very first one I created when I made the game, and it's about 6 pages. But there's one page which you keep your journal, but that page you would copy that multiple times to keep your daily record. So, about 4 years ago, I think, when I did the second Kickstarter, 3 years ago, to really redo a lot of parts of the game and see if I could upgrade it, I came across a Kickstarter where they were trying to do something, I think that they called it the Adventurer's Journal or the Character's Journal as well. It was a foreign company, and the way their journal was designed was you would open it and you'd have a play part where you could put D&D stats, and then you could draw your map, and then you could keep track of your character's progressions. And I was really taken with the ideal to the point that I had backed the campaign. I was going to try to get in touch with the creators and say, hey, is there a way you could customize this to my game? Unfortunately, that didn't fund. But I did email them and say, hey, if you relaunch, let me know. They did relaunch, and that one was actually canceled because it brought in less than the first one. And it kind of, my ideal to do the journal kind of died with that. It kind of ended. But as I was working on other supplements of the game, and in 2020, when the lockdown hit, a lot of that I had to start boxing up and putting away for personal reasons, because I was about to move. And I decided, I said, well, this might be a good chance to work on that journal that I had thought about, because I had never got the idea out of my head. And I had just come across some software that I was using for some of my supplements, and I was just getting great results out of it for doing things like covers and layout. Because I don't know anything about layout. But the software made it very easy, where it was almost what you see is what you get. And I decided, well, maybe I can do the journal. And that is what I spent a lot of time doing over the last 3 months, And that is what we bring to you this month is Journey to the Overland, the Adventurer's Journal. Now, the Adventurer's Journal is going to include, when you open it, I've got select pieces of art, a lot of the line art that went into the Overland. This is actually a quote from one of the novels, which is called Overland Quest. So if you read the novel, you will see where that quote comes from. This is some of the line art from the cover, the original game. And then the very first thing is your character sheet. So now with this journal, you can actually keep your character sheet with you at all times. You have all the pages you need, and you can refer back and forth. And it's legible. As far as I can see, it's very legible. But more importantly, you see the pages here where you have your Adventurer's Journal. So now every day as you play, you can make notes and keep records, and there is page after page of these journal pages. Because the idea was not to make this a book where you have 10 or 11 different character sheets, but where you have one character sheet that contains your character sheet and your entire journal of that character's travels or adventures in the Overland. So I think there's about 50 journal pages in here. And when you get through with the journal pages, I said, well, what else would be helpful or useful to go in there? You come to what I call the quick reference section, or what I titled the quick reference section. So the first thing you're going to get are tables. Some of the most common used tables in Journey to the Overland. Your table that talks about how to begin play, your daily actions, your experience points that you get, the percent of having an encounter. If you've played the game, you know how important these tables are. And so this entire sheet has been recreated in here in the book for a very handy and useful thing. So you don't have to run around trying to find tables in the middle of the game. You don't have to tab your rule book. They're all in here. Now, obviously, as the game goes on, if there's a rat or something, some of these, may not be applicable. But the nice thing about the journal is, you can write in here. You can, if you need to edit something, you just write in it. It's designed to be where you can own 3, 4, or 5 of these, just depending on how much you play the game. So we have just about most of the most useful tables are going to appear in here in this section. After that, we have some hex sheets. And the importance of some blank hex sheets is there's many locations in the Overland where you will need to record the number of a hex. You may bury treasure in a hex. So now you can actually either write that in here and maybe draw maps or whatever as you go, or you can use this if you're doing combat and you want to put your miniatures on the blank hex to resolve their movements back and forth if you don't want to use the map on the game board, or for any other reason where you just simply need blank hexes. You can even literally create your own towns in other areas. So you may say here, this is Zafton, and then you'll show here 3 hexes away that maybe there's a town, there's a treasure or whatever. And the cool thing is, I usually keep track of that on the map. I will cut out tokens or chits and I'll tape them to the map with some non-stick tape. But if you don't want to do that, then you can simply put them in here either with the number that's on the hex that they're in, or you can draw like the towns and show where they're relative to each other. Following that, there is a graph paper section, which most role players know, or people that have played role-playing type of games know that you will use graph paper, for any kind of thing. You may have a scenario where you need a puzzle, or you may have something where you need to memorize. And so what the graph paper is going to allow you to do is to quickly and easily create those types of charts or maps or whatever, anything you want to do with some graph paper. Next, there are sections for sketches. And I've always liked to do sketches of different scenes that occur in the game, different NPCs you meet. Now, when I first did my original character sheet, there was actually a box here after each week where you would do a sketch of what happened that week. So eventually the box came off for whatever reason, because it just didn't have enough room to leave that on there, plus make your journal entries. Well, now there's actually a sketch part at the back of the book where you can either sketch characters or monsters or places that you visited that you want to do a quick sketch of. The next section is a note section. So you have travel notes here. So this may be anything regarding places you visited, maybe a person you met there, something you left there. NPC comrade notes. So if you need more space to write what an NPC comrade is carrying, you can do that. Your NPC notes, which are divided for each NPC that's in your party that may have a special condition or something that requires a note. Your hex notes, so these would you could record hexes where you've left treasures, where you have a secondary home, or any other thing that pertains specifically to a hex. Town and castle notes. So again, you could put down here towns or castles where there's a warrant for your arrest. You could put down towns or castles where you have troops stationed, towns or castles that are your allies, and maybe the condition of those alliances. And then finally, just a section for world notes. And this is where you would note anything going on in the game world. Maybe the king is missing. Maybe the king's son has passed away. Maybe Mordecai has left Fire Castle. Anything that complains to what's going on, pertains to what's going on in the game world. And finally, we have some game maps. So these are some very small, but actually some very very good resolutions of the original game map, which is here on your left. This is the map of the Unknown Islands, which is on your right. And this map actually comes with the Unknown Islands supplement. This is the map that anybody that orders that is going to get. So it's just been reduced here for purposes of this game. Normally in the game, the Unknown Islands are right up there, which is pretty much where you would play. But if you buy the supplement, this is kind of the blowout of this map here. So you do get to see that with this journal. And then finally, the world map. So especially if you read the novels, there's a lot of reference to other locations in the Overland. The Overland is basically this continent here. And then kind of the rest of the world is off to this side, and obviously it loops around like a globe. So if you've wanted to see what the world map looks like. And then that is it. That is the Overland Journal.